Can you give us a brief background on Menkes as an organization and the history behind it, and how it relates to this South Vaughan Metropolitan Center?
Right, absolutely, Shab. A lot of people know Menkes as a condo developer, but really Menkes is a fully integrated real estate company. We're focused on the development, construction, ownership, leasing, and management of properties throughout Toronto. We're not just on residential. We also do office. We also do industrial and retail. So when we do a mixed-use development, we have all those capabilities in-house. Since the 1990s, we've been focused on mixed-use developments, what a lot of people are talking about today. But in fact, our project, Empress Walk, which is one of our company's signature properties in North York, really kicked off this wave of the live, work, play developments that we see happening so much today in Toronto. But over the past decade, Menkes has really been focused on three main neighborhoods. We have North York, where we've built 25 buildings to date. We have the waterfront, which is the South Core. As well, we now have the VMC. VMC aligns with our goals to develop projects in up-and-coming neighborhoods. Just like the vision my grandfather and father and uncles had for North York, we're seeing that play out here in VMC. With the addition of the subway and transit and the new offices coming to this neighborhood, we feel that our expertise and what we're going to bring to this new entertainment and cultural hub that's going to happen here in VMC, in South VMC, is going to be so iconic for this neighborhood.
What does master plan community mean to you? And what are the experiences in community building?
Shab, my family has really taken a big approach on creating new neighborhoods and adding to neighborhoods. My grandfather believed in Mel Lastman's vision for North York. We've built 25 buildings in North York, and that was an established neighborhood where we added to it. Here in Vaughan, we're able to curate a new ecosystem. So in downtown Toronto, or in major cities around the world, you have great shops, you have great restaurants, you have cultural elements that make up a city. We're going to bring all of those elements to this neighborhood because it doesn't exist right now. We're going to partner with different vendors in the neighborhood to create great cheese market, a great environment for restaurants. We're going to have a fantastic shopping experience. We're also going to bring the cultural hub to Vaughan. As a developer, when we build a new project, we look at how that site will impact the surrounding community, but we'll also be able to contribute through investment of infrastructure, incorporating these new amenities. Shab, being here in Vaughan, we have such a blank canvas. Having 75 acres just on our own site, we really can look forward to a curated experience in this new ecosystem, adding new residential towers, but also having the retail elements, the commercial elements, but also the new community center, the school, the outdoor stage. All these things are going to create a master planned community that we can really curate right from the beginning.
Can you talk about the significance of transit-oriented development, that infrastructure element of development? What is so significant? Why is it so important to developers like you guys?
When you talk about a transit-oriented development location, you can't help but think about South VMC. We're along the 400, we have Highway 7, we have Highway 407, but we also have Viva, and we have the TTC extension for the subway. This is a great location. This is a blue chip neighborhood. People are going to want to live here. I think when you think about the investment that the government has made into this neighborhood, this is an area that they want to thrive. This is an area that people will want to live in. This is the lifestyle that people want when they're living in a high-rise development. They want the ease of living in a high-rise because they may not necessarily want a car. They want to be able to lock their door, walk out, jump on the subway, and end up at Pearson International on a flight. This is a blue chip location in a fantastic neighborhood, in an up-and-coming neighborhood. Menkes has taken approaches where we've focused in on certain locations. For the past 40 years, we've been focused on the building of North York. For the last 15 years, we've been focused on the waterfront and continuing to develop that. We see this as our next big focus. Vaughan is a fantastic location. It's a hub location along the 400, along Highway 7, along the 407, but also we have the new extension of the TTC. This is a fantastic location within the Greater Toronto Area.
Jay, QuadReal as a global and also a Canadian major player in the real estate space. Could you tell us a little bit more about some of the work that QuadReal has done and how it's relevant to this particular project in South VMC?
Well, QuadReal itself is an investment, operating, and development company. We manage the assets of the BCI, which is the British Columbia Investment Management Corporation out in Vancouver. Although we're headquartered in Vancouver, we are a global company, as you mentioned. We're in 23 different cities around the world, 17 different countries. We manage and develop assets that include industrial, office, residential, retail, and service. So it's quite a diverse portfolio. The opportunity that we bring to the table here when we're developing in Vaughan is we learn lessons from our global partners around the world. As we develop and operate these different assets, we learn different lessons and we bring them to our new development that we're doing here in Vaughan.
Jay, QuadReal's experience in community building and development and planning, what does it mean to you?
Well, master planning and community is kind of what's the vision behind QuadReal. We look for sustainable and reasonable investment return for our clients at BCI, but we want to do it through a sustainable environment in which we bring a community to the future populations in which we serve. Master planning as a whole allows us to take a holistic look at a piece of land and figure out how best to bring a variety of elements together to best serve the community in the future. In Vaughan, we have a large piece of land. It's over 70 acres. It'll take a long time to build. We've been working with the City of Vaughan for 20 years to build the vision, and now we're starting to implement that vision. We're able to bring what's unique and all the elements of a great downtown to the City of Vaughan, and specifically in the South VMC. We're able to bring in new residential communities, new office, new retail and service, tie it all together with schools and community uses, as well as open space and park systems. And when you have a large piece of land like we do in Vaughan, we're able to look at it holistically, figure out how to create the foundation of a great master plan and a great new downtown for Vaughan.
Ralph, GPA have a long-standing experience and handling master plan communities. Could you just tell me what is master plan community and what makes your experience so much more dynamic, and what do you bring to a master plan community?
Well, it's interesting because everything's a master plan community, it seems, in at least in the GTA here in Toronto, and we've been very fortunate over the last 20 odd years of our practice to be involved in kind of larger scale, multifaceted, multi-use, mixed use developments, and a lot of these are former industrial sites, former commercial sites that are now primed for redevelopment, rejuvenation. And Toronto has grown. And what's been very interesting is we've been also focused on, infill downtown and along the lake. That what's been incredibly interesting is the growth of Toronto has been maybe kind of shifting over the last few years and kind of going outside of that central core. And there's incredible opportunity to kind of add that next layer of growth in Toronto. And so we've been, I'm going to say, through serendipity or whatever, I don't know. I think we've been very fortunate to have a lot of these projects. And I think our attitude towards them is community, to kind of start thinking about making that sense of community, that sense of neighborhood, as opposed to a project and divide it up into streets and blocks and heights and densities and all that. So it really is understanding all the kind of everyday living of a community and what makes people happy, and to be able to create a place that people want to be at and are proud of. And hopefully those also create communities where people want to visit, people want to live in. And so it's really kind of looking at it almost kind of like a recipe that you're going to make this great meal, and you want to have all the best ingredients. So for us, one of the key elements is those places of gathering, streets and squares, and great retail, great restaurants, and thinking of a kind of neighborhood that has all the best spaces, all the best community amenities that make up a great neighborhood. And then you start there and you think, okay, I think people are going to want to be in these spaces. And then the buildings in some ways become backdrops to those experiences. And so the buildings themselves have their own personalities. They have, clearly that's where people are going to live or people are going to work. But it's really that relationship between that person that's in that, apartment building or condominium or in that office, and how they relate to that building, how they relate to the street, the square, where they're going to go shop, where they're going to walk their dog. And it's creating all those little kind of scenarios, almost kind of stories, and start kind of creating those spaces for it. So it really is this kind of like cooking up a great meal, and it really is, for me, incredibly satisfying.
GPA have done a lot of master plan communities. In developing the South VMC, what inspirations and what type of references have drawn to you to compose this wonderful community?
Well, the VMC is an incredibly interesting place in Toronto. It's a very ambitious development that spans, multiple sites north and south side of Highway 7. So, there was a lot of work already being done, and we were kind of, how can I say, distant observers of it. It was, a big initiative by both the region, by the city, and so it was, clearly, bringing an incredibly important piece of infrastructure to the VMC, which is the subway. And so, looking, from a distance on that, we were kind of interested in it. I have to say, truth be told, like, why aren't we working? And then we got really lucky again, with where two of our clients, separately that we have, are working together on this with Quadreal and Menkes, and we got the call, and we kind of met, and I kind of started speaking about what I think about the entire neighborhood, and what I kind of sensed was it's an incredibly large. The VMC is very large, and what I was trying to understand is how can we break it down into kind of more digestible pieces. And what really excited me was that observation really dovetailed with, I think, what our clients were already kind of steering towards, which was to kind of see how we can break it down. And for me, it's almost like New York, right? Where New York is a very big place and has very distinct neighborhoods. And so what I thought was, this idea of South VMC, which was exactly the term that I was trying to find, and was already being kind of bandied about by our clients and their consultants. So I said, well, that's what it is. It's literally like there is a kind of big neighborhood, which is the Vaughan Metropolitan Center, but then within that neighborhood, there's this really great place called South VMC. And so for us, we started kind of leveraging that, and almost like, well, let everybody else be big and be brash and be close to the subway. We want to kind of just be the cool, new neighborhood. And so it's trying to kind of understand, I want to be Soho, or do I want to be the Upper West Side of New York, and using that analogy of trying to create a really exciting place that in itself, people start saying, you know what, I'm South VMC, right? I'm not, I'm VMC, I'm Vaughan. No, I'm South VMC. So that idea of ownership of your neighborhood, and that neighborhood has a personality, and you kind of feel like you're part of the neighborhood, is really at the heart of our kind of first initial reaction to the overall plan. And then looking at the kind of component parts, like the city has a great ambition for a really large park. So again, New York has the Central Park. Well, we are on the south side, and we have the big park. So it's actually really exciting, and that park comes, all the way into our site, and then it's trying to then knit together all the kind of component pieces of what I was saying before, the public realm of streets, squares, and parks. And so, as well as all those other amenities, which could be community facilities or retail experiences. And so it's really trying to kind of create a heart, a real sense of place in the South VMC that we own as a kind of community, and leverage that to kind of create the buildings that become the kind of component parts of the neighborhood.
Okay, perfect. Just one follow-up question.
Yeah, sure.
For the MUPs, the multiple users path, this is a very interesting concept. Could you tell me more about that?
So the multi-user path is one of the ways that you can actually navigate a neighborhood or a city or whatever. We have, again, how can I say it? I'm Italian background. My parents are Italian. I, was born here, but, spent a lot of time in Italy. Actually, our firm actually does work in Italy, which is a very interesting kind of reversal to bring a North American sensibility to a culture that's pretty old and pretty set in their ways. But I grew up in the suburbs of Toronto. So, so I kind of have this kind of interesting, very hyphenated experience. And so growing up in the suburbs, but going back to Italy and walking those streets of Rome or the streets of Florence and seeing how people react to spaces and that intensity that exists is completely different than living in Etobicoke, and I get on my bike and I get the ride down to a ravine and on a trail, and it's a very different experience, flat and wide versus very dense. And so what I think is really exciting about South VMC is that hybrid, that I think Vaughan is ready for that kind of urbanism, that kind of more intense, more collective experience. But at the same time, we want to create a kind of more relaxed feel. So it's, how can I say it? It's a downtown, but with a kind of little bit of a suburban DNA in it. So the idea of that trail, that connected trail, is bringing back that idea of another way of being able to kind of navigate within the neighborhood. There are streets, right, that are kind of typical kind of urban streets, but that there's other areas that you can create different connectivities and different enjoyment of the neighborhood. So, how you create those paths, where they are, how they connect it. You can just imagine the stories. Are you a jogger? Are you a mom with a stroller? And then there's, these kind of, our central kind of pedestrian district, which is very much more intense, almost like an Italian little main street. Clearly, this neighborhood, there's no doubt there's a kind of Italianish kind of spice in this neighborhood that surrounds the VMC that I think actually is going to really add the kind of excitement to the ground plane and some of the retail offerings.
Within the entire master plan community, there's undoubtedly a lot of open green space. Could you share with us more about what makes this green special, and what are some of the plantations, vegetations, things that and thought processes into creating this space memorable?
Well, that, again, that's an interesting question. I talked a little bit about a hybrid experience. Again, growing up in a suburb of Toronto, where green was pretty well everywhere. It was lots of space. And then, this idea of kind of creating a more condensed experience. And so the thought for me was, can I get those two to be closely kind of related to each other so that you kind of see one and the other almost at the same time? As opposed to, I'm in a suburb, I get in my car, I drive to the park, I get in my car, I drive to the mall, and it's very much destination driven. Here we wanted it always to kind of be dovetailed and intertwined. So I didn't want to lose the green. I want the green because it is really a large area, and we have this luxury of being able to create a wonderful landscape experience as well as a wonderful urban experience. And so that's the kind of part of the suburbs that I enjoyed. I used to say, the sun's different in the suburbs because you can see the whole sky, right? Whereas downtown, you're kind of always kind of within buildings, and you have to search out for the green. Here, when you're walking, all of a sudden there's green, there's green, there's green, but it's kind of connected in a more enjoyable and pedestrian-friendly way. So the green is of all different scales, and the idea of connecting them is really important. What we have in South VMC is everything kind of working together. We have really wonderful large-scale parks. We have opportunities for, and you see some renderings in the space that we're here, of wonderful amenities, green amenities, such as playing fields, tennis courts, all the things that are part of an outdoor living experience, but also just those spaces of gathering and relaxed, lawns, shade. We really want to plant a lot of trees. As you can tell, there was an ambition, even in our sales office, to plant hundreds of trees, because that's almost a kind of sign of what's to come, that we want to create a landscape which is generally, I'm going to say, pretty forlorn for decades, and now it's going to be this kind of lush oasis, and really that is important. And clearly, I'm going to say, over the last year of what we've all been going through worldwide, it's been very interesting on how much interest and need there is for those kind of spaces to get away from your tight, intense, exciting living, to be able to kind of take a breath, go for a walk, and enjoy the neighborhood that has offered all these wonderful amenities to you. So the idea of green, and again, we have one of, I'm going to say, Canada's leading landscape architects working with us, and she's just a fantastic landscape architect, and she is really part of that kind of creation and is dogmatically kind of protecting that and making sure that that is a signature of the community, that parks and streets and walkways, these lush planted tree-lined spaces are kind of a signature of the South VMC. I've also been very fortunate. I have a very easy job, I think, because all I get to do is have fun and create these spaces. The hard part are, the landscape architect who has to, do all the work to kind of get those spaces realized, and the other architects, which we are very fortunate to have a collection of really talented teams working on the buildings as well, which for me become the backdrop. Like, it's almost like if you're going to, if what I do is theater, and we're putting on the show, well, somebody has to kind of create the backdrop and the space that my show is in. And if they weren't good at it, it would kind of be like going to a theater and saying, wow, it's kind of strange space I'm in. They are really talented and really also embrace the ideas of creating this sense of community that is going to be South VMC.